Big Daddy Don Garlits built it, and they came. First, there was the Museum of Drag Racing in Ocala, Florida. Then there was the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame, where the 24th annual induction ceremony is about to start on Inside Drag Racing.
I cannot wait to hear what he says after this speech.
Any of you guys that didn't race back in the 60s and 70s, you missed out on the best part of drag racing, as far as I'm concerned. And a lot of guys here will agree with that.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Inside Drag Racing. This week we're coming to you from the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame, presented by Lucas Oil Products. Hello again, everyone. I'm Ted Jones, and, well, we're out in the reception area here. They have a little cocktail party, but inside, we're ready to start inducting our new inductees for 2014.
First up is Top Fuel racer John Abbott.
About 2 weeks ago, Don sends me an email and says, 5 minutes, no more than 5 minutes. So today, this afternoon, I told Donna, I says, Donna, your dad said 5 minutes. Donna says, you can talk as long as you want. But anyway, my drag racing experience and terrific run started back in 1953.
After his discharge from the Navy in 1959, he still wanted to go faster, so he designed and built his own dragster. Boy, those were the days, wasn't it? Didn't come off the shelf. They built it with a Chrysler Hemi on gas.
Now, the gas dragster, we did a little gas, and then we tried to do a little fuel, and I didn't know what I was doing with the fuel. I went down to see Bill Kins, because Bill Kins knew how to set up 97s on fuel. I asked him how much. He told me. I said, I'm going to run gas.
Still in need for speed. Came a new chassis, a 671 blown Pontiac engine on nitro that reached 190 miles an hour in a thin Denver air. Then came a nitro burning 392 Hemi and a new Woody chassis. Well, it was about as good as they got back in those days, but they wanted to compete on the national level. John took over the driving chores for the Fraser and Williams team, becoming one of the baddest and toughest teams in Top Fuel in the nation.
Then since 1985, our family racing is approaching 30 more years. Christopher Abbott, my oldest grandson, currently works for Steve Torrance on the Capco Top Fuel team. John Jr., along with his wonderful wife, Sandy, and my granddaughter, Kaylin, carry on the tradition with their twin top dragsters. And yes, I stand a proud grandpa as my 12-year-old granddaughter, Kaylin, won the 2013 Junior Dragster 2 Championships at Bandimere Speedway.
Next is legendary Pro Stock driver Warren Johnson.
We'd like to welcome Warren Johnson into the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame for 2014, the professor of Pro Stock, because he shows them how it's done.
Being from Iowa, I took a personal interest in a racer from Minnesota by the name of Warren Johnson. I didn't know him, but I'd read about him in drag news, and I knew that he was supposed to be pretty fast and a rising star. Everybody that was anybody was at Tulsa for that race in 1972. After Warren made his first pass, he was 13 miles per hour faster than any other pro stock on the property. They didn't quite really know what to make of it. The media took notice, the fans took notice. I went to his pit area, started asking questions. I received several slightly terse answers to my questions, but I was impressed by his genuine openness in replying to my questions. There are some milestone moments in WJ's career that stand out in the pro stock. WJ was the first driver to exceed 180, 190, and 200 miles per hour in that category. He did it all in a space of 15 years. He had designs on being the first second pro stock driver as well, but his son Kurt beat him to that. In '82, General Motors commissioned WJ to develop a hybrid race version of the popular big block Chevy engine. The DRCE engine is still the only engine that anybody driving a GM product to a win in pro stock powers their cars by. I asked WJ earlier this week how real the rivalry was when he and Bob Glidden were really going at it toe-to-toe back in the 80s. His answer was very succinct as usual, that it wasn't such a rivalry as it was just two serious drag racers that both want nothing less than a win. Warren's often dismissed the importance of the driver contribution to the success of the overall racing effort. Most pro stock drivers would probably take issue with that. However, WJ has proven he is indeed a very capable and probably one of the very best of drivers.
He never ceases to amaze me. me. The man is up in the years, but can still cut a 00 light. And that's what it takes in pro stock, because these cars are only separated by thousandths of a second. And it's the driver that makes the difference.
In 2001, he was tabulated as the 7th best driver in the 50 years of NHRA racing. In 2012, he was named one of the best 25 drivers in the history of auto racing by BleacherReport.com, one of 7 drag racers so named. Warren Johnson is the winningest pro stock racer of all time. He has dedicated his life to making racing fast, safe for the racers, and entertaining for the fans that support the sport. When match racing was still in fashion, nobody did it better.
Well, as you can tell, I like to keep things short, so I'm going to probably... No, I've enjoyed a pretty fulfilling career. I would say I probably screwed up, because listening to Hawley and the rest of these guys, I work way damn too hard.
More legends after the break as we continue our coverage of the 2014 International Drag Racing Hall of Fame Induction Ceremony. This edition of Inside Drag Racing is being brought to you by ARP, the world leader in fastener technology. East Coast Drag Times Hall of Fame, coming to Henderson, North Carolina, October 17th through the 19th. Flowmaster, the exhaust technology company. And by Hurst, America's #1 shifter. Our International Drag Racing Hall of Fame induction ceremony continues with Frank Hawley.
Frank's accomplished a lot of stuff. He's already in the Canadian Drag Racing Hall of Fame. He was voted NHRA's top 50 drivers of all time. He's one of 15 drivers to win national events in Top Fuel and Funny Car, 2-time world champion. He is one of those unique individuals that anything he puts his mind to, I believe he can do. He started the most successful drag racing school. He's taught over 25,000 people. He's been a huge inspiration to me and to many, many other people. It is my pleasure to introduce to you my boss, my mentor, one of my closest friends, and one of my heroes in the sport, Frank Hawley.
This is about love and passion. I went to my first drag race when I was 9 years old. Watched some front motor top fuel cars run. The ground shook. They had flames painted on their helmets, and I actually thought that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And I wondered if you could possibly make a living at this. When I turned 16, a bunch of local racers said, "You really ought to get the kid a race car." Now, my parents didn't have much money, but we bought an old front motor top fuel car, and we blew up, caught on fire, had a lot of problems. But back in the middle late 70s, that alcohol funny car thing was catching on, and we went to Cayuga, Ontario, and we were going into the semifinals, and Wayne, our crew chief, comes to me, he says, "We don't have any alcohol." I said, "Just put nitro in it." So we go out, we get to about 1,000 feet, and it throws the crankshaft out on the ground. I'm in a fireball, an inferno that I can't even believe, and at that very moment, my mom saw her only beloved son flying off the end of the raceway in a flaming fireball. And she turns back and she looks at my dad and she says, "But we're in a final." Raced for a couple more years. I pretty much wrecked everything we had. So we sold what we had left, and my mom got a hold of me and she said, "You'd sent a resume in to an Austin Coyle, and he would like to talk to you about driving the Chi-Town Hustler." I get to Chicago, and he told me, he said, "I have sawed the roll cage off of our funny car, and then I soldered it back on. And if you crash my car, you will die. And if you don't die, I will kill you." And he said, "We got a guy around the corner, and they got a chrome shop. What they do is they get rid of bodies." And he said they put them in these acid tanks, and that's it. There are no bones, no teeth. They're gone. And I'm laughing, and he's not. He's just looking at me. And I started thinking, for a little chrome shop, those guys do have really nice cars. The first day I went to work for him, I said, okay, I can only work about half a day because I've got to find a place to live. He said, I've got a 2-bedroom apartment, and you can have a bedroom. And I thought, well, this will be okay for a while. And so I go over to Austin's apartment, and as we walk in, I'm following, and he goes, oh, son of a bitch. And I said, what? And he goes, the alligator got out. What do you mean the alligator got out? And he had plywood on the top, and it's on the floor, and I said, where does it go? And it's a 2-bedroom apartment. He says, usually ends up behind the couch. And he said, we got to get him. And I was like, no, we don't have to do anything. And so he said, come on. So we go over, and he drags this couch out. Sure enough, right along the baseboards, this damn 4-foot gator. And so he's giving me instructions on how to get the gator. He's like, don't fuss around with this. He didn't say fuss. He said, you just go for it. You got to make a commitment if you're going for an alligator. And so I'm thinking, I am not wrestling a gator. I want to drive the car, but this is not going to happen. And then I started thinking, listen, I'm already going to be driving the truck, driving the race car, doing the bottom end, doing the clutch, packing the chutes, and the fuel. And if this gator bites Austin's hand, I'll be doing the top end too. So this might be a little selfish, but I decide to help Austin with the gator. So we jump on and wrestle this thing and flip it around, throw it back in the thing, put the plywood on, throw some cinder blocks on top. Austin, I swear to God, is like nothing happened. We sit down, we eat some dinner, watch some TV, go to bed. I got up in the morning, never went back.
But we'll be back with more coverage of the 24th Annual International Drag Racing Hall of Fame Induction Ceremony. Welcome back to Inside Drag Racing at the Don Garlits Museum of Drag Racing in Ocala, Florida. Here's Big Daddy himself to introduce racer and builder Hal Berger.
Hal Berger is our next inductee into the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame, and he's quite a guy, quite a craftsman. He built this entire body on my Sidewinder. He could build chassis. He could drive the cars. He drove funny cars. He drove dragsters. He could do it all, build his engine. He's one of the original old guys that actually could go into the shop, take all the pipe off the wall, build a car, build a body, build an engine, put it together, go out and race. Nobody can do that anymore. Everybody is all compartmentalized today.
Those of you familiar with the Detroit Autorama, the Riddler Award is the epitome of awards for the show car specialty people. Hal Berger won that in 1964, the first one ever, and he won it with a race car. Who builds their race car so nice that they win the most prestigious award in the country?
That car that won the Riddler, I took it over to a guy that was doing aluminum work there in Detroit, and he wanted $300 to build a nose piece for that thing. Well, that's back when I was making $100 a week. So I went back home and I ended up hammering the thing out, and that's how it started. So my first shop was over on Gratiot. It was in the back of a music store, and then the landlady lived upstairs. Well, I met Tommy Ivo, and he come over and he says, okay, if I work on my car at your shop. And, I mean, I was in awe. Yeah, absolutely, you know. So I came to work the next day, and the landlady says, come here. She said, I want to talk to you. She says, this guy, he sleeps all day and he's up all night. She says he was out there having a radio blasting all night. He had his trailer all apart back there. She says, you're going to have to move. So Ivo got me kicked out of my first garage. Then I moved to a shop out on Grossbeck, and I got hooked up with the Logie brothers, and we did the first Comet flip-top funny cars.
They got to be the key people in the early funny cars, and Al did the aluminum work in just about all those body installations. I suspect that there's a lot of tables in this room that have been touched by his talent.
Back in the 70s, there was a saying, it was bitchin'. Everybody else said that somebody else invented that, but drag racers invented that because the guy said, oh, that's a bitchin' paint job, or that's a bitchin' frame, right? This is bitchin'. Thank you very, very much.
Tom Hoover is our next Hall of Fame inductee.
In in high school. Everybody talks about what's going on. I remember my yearbook back in '59. All the other jocks had their wrestling and football and everything else they did. My little picture of a 125-pound dude here that said, Hoover don't speed, he just flies low.
He talks fast, he walks fast, he lives his life 100% speed. His drag racing legacy spans some 35 years of professional driving in the sport and another 15 coaching up-and-coming drivers. And I've got one very special one right here, Brady Calavoda.
I went to Frank Hawley School. I was one of those 25,000. Dropped out. Got my GED. But I made it somehow. Anyway, it takes somebody in this close-knit community that we have, that is drag racing, to vouch for your character and your talents, and that helps. And that's what Tom did for me. That was my first paid crew member gig at this level. Well, I was paid sometimes. It was, most times we didn't get paid. It was depending on the week and other situations, other circumstances, right, Dave Lindsay? But it was a good gig, and I appreciate that. I've been meaning to talk to you about that, Hoove. Yeah. And you're as good, if not a better person off the track, but let's talk about some of those on-track things. I mean, beginning in the 1960s, campaigning with Ma and Pa Hoover, who we all know, who were already in the Hall of Fame, winning the 1965 AHRA Winter Nationals, moving on to funny cars, a series of White Bear Dodge funny cars, the first Showtime funny car.
His name, Showtime, has never been about showing off, but it's always been about showing up and giving the fans a really good show every time.
1976 AHRA Funny Car Championship, winner of 5 NHRA national events, the last of which was in Columbus, Ohio, 1997, 6 weeks or so after undergoing a quadruple bypass. 9 weeks, fine. Don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. I think 6 weeks sounded better.
And perhaps his biggest accomplishments put him in the company of Bernstein or Prudhomme as the only drivers being both in the 4 and 5 second clubs. He's won Top Fuel championships in Australia, raced for decades with Cannonball and the team here from England, and he's laid down numerous Top Fuel and funny car runs in Sweden, Mexico, and Canada.
In the days, you say, well, Hoove, how'd you get your cars over there? Well, the track owner would buy the car, and every year, I raced there for several years, would bring an engine in a crate.
He may have single-handedly been responsible for all the excess baggage fees that we now all pay on flights. We used to ship an entire engine on 14 suitcases to race overseas when there was 4 of us flying.
Tom, you're truly one of the good guys and a hero, and it's my privilege, along with Paige, to induct you into the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame. Tom Hoover.
Our last International Drag Racing Hall of Fame inductee coming up next on this special edition of Inside Drag Racing. This edition of Inside Drag Racing is being brought to you by ARP, the world leader in fastener technology. Steel Rubber, quality crafted rubber parts and weather stripping. Stage 8, the world's best locking fastener. And by Custom Auto Sound, the originator of classic car OEM fit radios since 1977. Back in Ocala, Florida, this name should be familiar to MAV viewers.
Started to get to know Forrest and Charlotte back in 2001 when Lucas Oil Products was a relatively small company, relatively unknown. Back then, Forrest had dabbled in some sponsorships with some teams, some races. He raced a little. He loved motorsports, though, and he especially loved NHRA. And because of that love and belief, he made a big bet. And back then, it was a big bet. It was a tremendous amount of money for a company their size. And he made that bet with us. And that's to sponsor the Premier Sportsman Series at NHRA, which we all know now as Lucas Oil Products. At the same time, he went off and started sponsoring teams and more teams and more teams until he built a stable that probably is unsurpassed in the history of the sport. At the same time, Charlotte went out and got her Super Comp license. Morgan was racing Super Comp as well, moved through alcohol and quickly into Top Fuel.
Everybody knows Charlotte's my wife, right? Morgan's my son.
After all that came together, Lucas Oil went through a period of explosive growth that they'd never, ever seen before. And Forrest was humble enough to say, well, it was all because of NHRA. I'm sure some of it was, but in my opinion, most of it was because of his smarts, his keen sense of people, and his business sense. Today, they branched out into just about every other sport. You can't watch a sporting event live or on TV without seeing the Lucas Oil Shield.
We own, I think, 6 different racing series. We have our own production company. We have our own channel, MAV TV. We have racing in Europe, Australia, Mexico.
He doesn't need to do any of this stuff, really, if you think about it. He's kind of grown beyond a lot of this, but he still does it because he cares, he loves it, and he wants to give back. Suffice to say that he'll be supporting sports and racing at NHRA for many, many years to come. So thank you, Forrest, for that.
I'm really so proud to be here and be part of it. But it's really because we made drag racing work as a sponsor, as a business. And he's right, I do have, I think, a little vision, but some of it's common sense too. I looked out and said, I want to be in front of all the people who are in the auto parts industry, where I want to sell my stuff. At the time, even AutoZone was still sponsoring the race in California. So all the auto parts stores were playing in NHRA. So that's where I want to be the big guys. And I did. And it worked. One other thing. Don, will you tell Bob Fry that your nominating me had nothing to do with that sign right there?
And finally, recipient of the Founders Award, artist Kenny Youngblood.
Harry and I decided the Founders Award this year ought to go to Kenny Youngblood. You know, what can you say? It's just the finest art in the world.
He's a historian for our sport because look at some of the paintings and artwork that he's put together over the years that represents from the very beginning to now.
He did all of those posters. He did Night Wings, where the monowing car shows in the back. And back when this museum first opened in 1984, Kenny did this entire wall. This is all done freehand. I mean, look at the artwork, how he's covered McEwen's complete career from beginning to end. And it's just like having the cars here. They're so lifelike.
It was when you actually had me come back there and do the Corvette mural in the museum. Terry and I were amazed at how beautiful the museum was, and how meticulously restored all these cars were. As Terry put it, it's the only car museum where the people walk on cement and the cars are on carpet, you know. But I have to confess, Don, every night when you would leave, I'd go around and sit in every one of those friggin' cars, man.
We closed the 2014 Drag Racing Hall of Fame induction ceremony with some of the fantastic artwork of Kenny Youngblood. Should you like to attend next year, contact the Don Garlits Museum of Drag Racing at the website below. Hope to see you there. So long, drag racing fans.